everyone, I'm Melissa from Knitting the Stash, and this is episode 26 in the podcast series. This one's all about survival knitting, and I'll explain that in a moment. First off, of course, thanks for joining me. It's so nice to have you here. It's nice to see you if you're coming back, and it's lovely to meet you if you're new. You can find me just about everywhere as Knitting the Stash, on YouTube obviously, on Ravelry and Instagram, and on the blog, which is knittingthestash.wordpress.com. So episode 26, we just celebrated the podversary last episode, so this is a kind of like cheers to year number 2 of Knitting the Stash, I hope. Thanks to everyone for your comments, and I know that a bunch of the giveaway items made it to their new home, so I'm happy to hear about that. Let's see, what's on today's episode? Survival knitting means a lot of different things, and I'm gonna I'll talk about that. Basically, my job has been a little bit, my day job has been a little bit crazy of late. I'm a professor at the University of Illinois, and I'm teaching 3 classes, including an overload this semester. So, and one of them is a new prep, and I love them all, and I absolutely love the teaching, but it is it's taken a lot of my creative powers. The new prep class is a speculative futures class, which is awesome. We've been reading things like Fahrenheit 451 and Handmaid's Tale and World War Z. We just finished World War Z. And reading lots of short stories. They've been working on projects, interdisciplinary craziness. And a lot of that's finishing up, but it's been a semester of creative class planning, let's just say. So my brain has been absorbed by that. And then just last week went to my conference, my annual conference, which is the Society for Literature, Science, and the Arts, and gave a paper out there about EEG and EEG wearables and fiction and really fun stuff. I don't really talk about my research too much on here, but maybe I should. You'll have to let me know. Anyway, we were at the conference, and that took a little more creative brain power. And so my knitting over the last few weeks to months has been not exactly the imaginative, like crazy cabled art modification that you guys are used to. So yeah, survival knitting, that's what this show's about today. And I have a bunch of it to share with you, so hopefully if you are in survival mode at this point in the year, coming up on the holidays, this may hit home for you. I am coming to you not from my normal spot. I'm coming to you from New York, from the little cabin that my husband and I built about 5 years ago. You can see bits and pieces of it in the background. We did this all by hand ourselves, and I've talked about it in another episode, so I'll put all that in the show notes. But it's a nice quiet spot out here usually, except that today is the first day of hunting season in New York, so there have been shotguns going off all over the farmland surrounding us, and it has not been quite as peaceful as it normally is. But it's lovely to be out here, to be away. It is Thanksgiving week in the US. Happy Thanksgiving to those of you who are celebrating, and if you're not, it's a strange US kind of tradition, and I know I at least have a family lunch to go to and a family dinner, and it'll be fun to see everybody and catch up, and so that's what I'm looking forward to, a little bit of relaxation and R&R this week, and some knitting. So let's get to the good stuff. Survival knitting has meant much more, let's just say, garter stitch and stockinette, and just trying to find projects that don't require a lot of, you guys know I like to modify projects, so finding projects that don't require a lot of modification that I can just kind of pick up and go with, get in the car, if I'm sitting at night for the 1 hour I have between coming home from teaching and actually just passing out from exhaustion, you know, that kind of knitting. And it's been really fun to revisit a few different patterns that are fairly simple patterns, like socks and shawls, that I kind of know by heart. And the creative part for me, because it's been survival mode, has been to try to use some different yarns, and to try some new things that way, as opposed to modifying the patterns and, you know, coming up with something else entirely. Or you guys saw a couple episodes ago, I've been struggling with Spencer's sweater. I'm still struggling with it because I haven't had a chance to even look at it. So I brought my massive bag of sweater yarn out here to New York, and my hope is that I will get to get to a place where I have some brain space and brain power to actually look at the sweater and get the sizing right. It's just one of those things where I set it aside and thought it's not worth it to kind of mess it up over and over again. It's better to just get in a better space, finish the semester or get to Thanksgiving break and try to work on that sweater. So that's where I'm at with Spencer's sweater. But the survival knitting that I've been doing has been really wonderful. So for example, my FO for this week is another Linus shawl, and a Shawl Linus by Annette Cordes. And you'll notice, what am I wearing? I'm wearing my modified Shawl Linus that I talked about in a couple episodes ago. It's like the skinny version, so it never gets very thick. And I can just kind of knot it up like a tie or a cravat or something, you know. It's the perfect kind of accessory for me because it's not too bulky, but it keeps my neck warm, and it fits under all my sweaters, so I've been really happy with that. And the Shawl Linus is nice because it's basically garter stitch on the bias, and all you're doing is one increase, a decrease, and then when you come back you're doing one other increase to kind of create that biased fabric. So this is my version where I just stopped doing that extra increase and just kept it skinny, and I've really been loving it. So that was one survival knit that I did. The other one is the Shawl Linus, so this is the actual shape that the Shawl Linus usually takes. You can see that it it goes from this tiny little edge all the way to a kind of triangle and then out back to a tiny little edge. It's a great shape for a shawl for me as far as I'm concerned. I'm not a big fan. I've made a few of the big shawls, the ones that you like sweep around your shoulders, and they're like the full-on massive shawl kind of thing. I love knitting them, but I don't wear them. This shawl just makes sense to me because it's very wearable. You just kind of wrap it around and it's skinny enough. But since we're talking about survival knitting, the difference here is that the yarn I used for this is my handspun. And so this may sound funny to some of you because I spin and I knit and I'll do it all from fleece to whatever, but I've never actually knit anything with my handspun. And I think that's in part because my hand, if knitting is to produce this kind of product, and I'm a process knitter, but you still produce products in the end. I feel like spinning, like the product of spinning is like a skein of yarn, and it's like they're perfect finished objects, they're beautiful in their own right, and I just love them and I don't want to do anything with them. I've also been really nervous about them because I've been unsure of like how good they are, like color-wise, construction-wise, all the different things that come with working on your own handspun. So I was really, really pleasantly surprised, not only at how cool it was to knit a full object with my handspun, but how cool the colors came out. So this yarn was 2 different 4-ounce bumps of, I believe it was a superwash merino. In the show notes, I'll link to my Ravelry project page where all the info is about this spin. And because it was 2 4-ounce bumps, it was 8 ounces of fiber, and I ended up with 2 skeins of yarn plus a little bit extra. And this little Linus shawl scarf is just one of those 2.5 skeins of yarn. And I did this spin as a combo spin. So here I'm going to put in some pictures so that you can see what the original 2 bumps of fiber looked like. And I spun each bump of fiber to a separate bobbin as a singles and then plied them together. And the trick with a combo spin is that you want to try to find 2 bumps of fiber or multiple bumps of fiber, because there was a really cool article in a recent spin-off magazine about trying to spin a whole sweater's worth of fiber just from your stash and how you do a kind of combination spin to do that. Anyway, I just used 2 bumps together, singles, one to each bobbin, and then plied them together. And as you can see from the pictures, the 2 bumps of fiber were kind of similar, but not totally similar. And when I put them on the bobbins as singles, they really did start displaying slightly different color values than I originally saw in the actual fiber. So that was an interesting process in and of itself. And the final skein of yarn, I wasn't totally crazy about it. These aren't my colors. I should just say that. These aren't my colors, my typical colors. I'm a purple, pink, you can tell, like jewel tones kind of person. But the colors in this kind of surprised me a little bit in the skein, and then I loved them as singles. In the skein, I was, as a 2-ply, I was a little bit less, like psyched about them. And I think that's partially why I waited to knit them up, but knitting on the bias like this for this shawl, I was super happy to see that, well actually I started on this end, so I should show you this end. This was the very beginning of the shawl. It starts here. I think it'll show up, yeah. And knitting on the bias, you can see the striping that happened, which is really cool. And it not only striped here in the kind of more narrower part of the shawl, but you can see if I hold up the whole thing that it does a repeat of the stripe. You see that? In the thicker banded, wider part of the shawl, you're getting a similar kind of repeat of the striping, which I think is really, really cool. And I really actually can't believe like how cool the striping looks in the finished object. So this is all to say, knit with your handspun. I've been told that for years, and I was just like, nah. My handspun skeins are my own, they're their own FOs. They don't need to be knit up. But man, is this satisfying to see a kind of finished project from 2 bumps of fiber that was a combo spin, and to see the striping come out. The other thing I'd say is that the striping that came out here reminds me very much of the stripes that were in the original bumps of fiber, because they were kind of variegated fiber in that they had no discernible, did they have a I don't think they had a discernible repeat. But when I spun them up, since I just went to singles and then went to the 2-ply, it ended up with this really cool striping pattern, which reminds me very much of the bumps of fiber. So there's something to be said about really, I'm a convert, I'm a believer now that you should really spin into your homespun and see what happens, because that'll give you a lot of information about what you might want to do going forward. I would totally do another combo spin at this point, and knit it up in a kind of simple garter just to see what happens. It's a way to play around with color, and it's just really fun. So I don't know who is going to be gifted this shawl. Someone in my family, very likely. We're coming up on the holidays. Not my colors, I don't think, but they are really beautiful. It reminds me almost of like a beach or like a springtime kind of color sequence. So someone will be gifted this lovely thing. The other survival knitting I've been doing is sock knitting, of course, right? And I showed you last time I had some plans in the works to knit up some socks for my dear friend, and I can say it's Jean now because Jean has seen the sock, tried it on, everything's good, everything fit. But here's the yarn. So, and you can see it's a very dark yarn. This is the main body of the sock, and this is going to be the heels and toes in this kind of gray. Dropping socks. So last time I think I just barely had a cuff done, but I finished one of the socks. And as usual in New York, I don't have my sock form, so we're gonna do the sock on the hand trick, which worked last time pretty well. So here's the sock. Sock on the hand, people, it's the way to go. Who needs sock forms? So you can see the toe is in that contrasting kind of gray, browny kind of fiber. And you can see here that the black is not actually black. It's got some really neat greens and purples in it, and it was dyed by one of my friends, Sarah Fields, who does Dragon Spindle Designs. I love her yarn, and this was one of her, out of her line of like menswear kind of socks, and I just love the way that the fiber works up. You can really see it in that light, that it's not a simple black, that it really does have a lot of other interesting things going on. Here's the heel in that contrasting color, and the contrasting color is part of the Walking Dead series done by Leslie of LB Art Yarns. So this is like my indie dyed sock. Love it. Superwash merino with some nylon mixed in, and a very simple sock. I'm using you know, just a variation on the Susan B. Anderson's How I Make My Socks pattern, which I think is a great, just vanilla sock pattern. You can do whatever you want with it. I've used it to make socks that have completely different cuffs, completely different toes, that have cabling or patterning on the leg or on the foot. It's just like a kind of like in the background of my mind, it's like the basic pattern for a sock, because I like to do my socks top down, and I like to do a square toe on my socks, and I like to do this kind of reinforced heel. So here's sock number 2 in the works, and same thing, same difference, just haven't finished all of the foot. And as I said last time, I'm using these awesome new ChowGoo interchangeables, which I didn't know about until Beth from my guild told me. I've been looking for some sock interchangeables for a very long time. And these I think are pretty new. So ChowGoo's awesome, totally flexible cord, really great sharp needles, all interchangeable. They come in this great little set. And in part because of these, I've just been whipping through these socks. I was knitting them at the guild meeting last week. How I fit a guild meeting in between the teaching and the traveling to Arizona and everything else, I really couldn't tell you. But it happened on Tuesday night and I was there, and that's all I remember. And I was knitting these socks because I was doing magic loop, and a couple of lovely ladies from the guild kind of both turned around at once and said, "Oh, I always wondered like how people knit socks that way." And at that point I was so fried, of course, I just looked at Debbie and I said, "Debbie, what is this called that I was doing?" I couldn't remember that it was magic loop. She's like, "Magic loop." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, that's magic loop." That's how fried I am. If this podcast seems a little discombobulated, it's because we're surviving here, people. So great needles, and it was really fun to see these ladies. They were knitting on double points, and I love double pointed needles. That's like my other go-to, but I've become a kind of convert to this flexible cable interchangeable sock needle magic loop. So it's pretty sweet. What else can I say about these guys? Not too much, I don't think, but that's my survival knitting for like the car or the guild meeting or wherever I've been, is to kind of pull those socks out and try to get them done. Jean just had a birthday, and these are going to be her birthday socks, so they are almost finished, and I'm pretty psyched about that. So that's like the handspun shawl and Jean's socks. I have a couple of other little spins in progress. I've been working on I've just pulled out the Jacob fleece, and I'll pull it out for you. So some of you know from this last summer I picked up some beautiful Jacob from Forget Me Not Farm at the farmer's market here in town, which is awesome. There's a great farmer's market. And this is part of the Jacob that I picked up. It's really beautiful fiber. I spun up some Jacob on my Ashford Traditional. I think you can see that. You can see how far I got. Not very far. But I pulled this out, and I'm hoping to kind of finish that while I'm here. And so that'll be survival spinning as opposed to survival knitting. Let's see. The other thing I've been working on is, since Debbie gave me that drop spindle, I've been drop spindling as much as possible to try to you know, learn that as a cool technique. So that's been fun. But before we left the house, I grabbed a couple things that I'm hoping to work on, including that massive bag of Spencer's sweater. I always kind of overcompensate when I'm traveling. I'm like, okay, I've been in survival mode. Suddenly I'm gonna have, you know, a little bit of a time to knit and whatnot, which isn't totally true because I have like a stack of papers to grade that's like this thick, and I joke you not, like seriously. But I get a little overzealous, so I have like a massive sweater to knit. I'm gonna finish the socks and do the Jacob's spin. Oh, it's like, I need to learn to just relax, I think. I think that might be a good thing to do, relax. But I'm not right now, so I'll just tell you about what I'm planning to do. So I knit this hat a while back. This is the Manning Park hat, which is an awesome pattern. And it has a cool contrasting brim that I did in a superwash so that it wouldn't be scratchy, and then the yarns that I used for the outside are an alpaca that I picked up in Scotland on one of my travels, and just some gray yarn that I used for a blanket from Knit Picks a while back, just a basic wool of the Andes kind of yarn. And you can see there's a little bit of color work. It doesn't show up as much because of the colors I've chosen, but there's a little bit of color work here to transition. And it has a picot edge, and that really great. I love the turned brim and the superwash inside to kind of, it really makes it so warm and comfortable when you put it on. It's a very like slouchy hat, so I tuck it back here. And it's just really super comfortable, really warm. I wear it all winter long. It's like my go-to hat. So I've been promising Spencer that I would make him a Manning Park hat. And so I went digging in my stash to try to find some stuff. And last week when I was in Arizona, I dragged the boys to Tempe Yarn and Fiber, a beautiful shop out there. And I picked that one in particular. There are a couple others, local yarn stores in Phoenix. But I picked that one in particular because they had some fiber, and I was really excited about that. And they have local fiber from Wilhana, Tunis, which I'll show you here. This is their tag. Let's see if it'll show up. So it's this local farm in Tempe. And there's the Wilhana, Tunis. And they have all kinds of different breeds of sheep that they raise locally, and then they source some internationally. So I did pick up some Ile-de-France roving, or comb top, and they had some others, some Polworth from Australia and things like that. But the local breeds were really cool. And so I picked up a little bit of fiber, just a couple little 2-ounce bumps just to test out. One was the Ile-de-France, and the other was some Tunis. I don't have those in my stash, and I thought that'd be fun to spin up. But they also were selling yarn from the same flock. And this is a California Red 3-ply sport that they had. And these were they were like amazingly cheap. They were like $10 and it was buy one, get one free. How can a yarnie resist that kind of thing at a local yarn store in Tempe, Arizona? Not. So I have these, and I thought, well, they'll make perfect mittens or a hat or something, you know, because they're beautiful neutral. I got home and I wanted to work on this Manning Park hat. And I found a couple great contrasts. So one is going to be this mountain meadow wool that I actually won as a prize. Believe it or not, podcasters even win prizes sometimes. I won this as a prize from Rachel Smith's Wool and Spinning podcast, and it is a 3-ply DK weight Targhee wool. So it's the same weight, right? We've got a nice kind of dark chocolate brown, and then this beautiful California Red, just neutral color. And so I thought those two would be perfect for the kind of darker part and the lighter part of the hat, right? And then for my superwash inside, so that it's really cozy and comfortable, I want to do this beautiful red. So, and this is a Tennis Fiber Arts. I got this a long time ago as part of one of her packs, like try out their yarn kind of packs, and it's also a DK weight. And this is the same yarn that I used for the inside of the brim for this one, just a different color. So the nice thing is I can go back to my pattern and my notes and my needles, and I can use my gauge from that hat to help me guesstimate how many stitches to cast on for Spencer's head, because his head is much bigger than my head. So that'll be the hat, and I think it'll be really beautiful. So this will be the inside, this will be the dark kind of outside around the brim, and then this will be the top of the hat. And I just think that that combo is really, really gorgeous. So I'm very happy about that, and I'm excited to try out another version of this Manning Park hat, which has been super successful hat of the winter months, and I love it, and I highly recommend the pattern. The pattern is actually by a delightful woman that I did a test knit for, and I will put all of the information in the show notes. Here is the Manning Park hat, her version of it, which is a beautiful version. And this is Laura Deer of Black Crow Knits, so I'll put all that in the show notes for you to check out in case of interest. All right, so that's what's in the works. I'm hoping in my survival mode to have this brain space to work on Spencer's sweater and get that Manning Park hat started and enjoy some spinning and just relaxation a little bit as I grade all those papers. But the other thing I've been doing and kind of promising myself And like I said, I don't usually talk about work, but I thought I would give you a quick couple minutes on what I've been reading and teaching in class, because some of you have been asking, since I teach science fiction, I teach speculative futures, I teach all kinds of really fun literature, like what I've been reading. So here you go. Here's the segment for those of you who are interested in what I've been reading. I told you what we've been doing in class. The next novel we're doing in class is The Postmortal, which is a Drew Magary novel about like when the United States invents the cure for aging, what happens. As I tell my class, it doesn't end well. Every book we've read, it doesn't end well. But this one has a lot of really good humor, which is kind of unusual for science fiction or a speculative futures novel. It's not totally dystopic, you know, like the world's gonna come to a horrible end. It does, but there's a lot of really interesting, kind of thoughtful stuff along the way. So I'm reading that as part of this week's relaxation project. And we had an event with a bunch of my speculative future students, and everybody around the table started saying, like, what are you guys reading? What are you up to now? And I said, well, it's kind of sad. Like, as an English teacher, you often don't read as much as you once did, you know, for pleasure. So one of my students, who's so sweet, he just said, that breaks my heart to hear that you don't read as much. And I assured him, I said, well, last summer, you know, I read 3 books and listened to one, just, you know, trying to get ready for classes and stuff. It's not that I don't read, it's just that I don't read as much for fun. But when we were at the guild meeting on Tuesday, we've been meeting at our local public library, which is awesome. Great place for guilds to meet, I think. And so before the meeting, I took 5 minutes and poked around in the new releases. And I love books. I've always been a huge fan of fiction that kind of takes up old classics and kind of rewrites them a little bit. So, you know, you read Gone with the Wind, and then you read, what's the, Scarlet was the kind of like fan fiction kind of sequel to it. Or you read Wuthering Heights, and then you read Heathcliff, or there was a new one I saw about Captain Hook. If you read Lolita, then you read Lowe's Diary. You know, just all these books that kind of play with the original. So I love Jane Eyre. It's one of my favorite novels ever. For those of you who didn't know, now you know. And look what this is. Great. Can you see it in the light? Yeah. Mr. Rochester. Who could resist that kind of thing, right? And I've only gotten into the first few pages of this, but after I finish this podcast, I will be upstairs knitting socks and reading Mr. Rochester. I'm not sure if I can do those 2 things at once, but I'm gonna try. So we'll see. So that's what I'm reading, and it's been quite fun to imagine a time and space where my brain will be fully functional again, and I will be out of survival knitting mode, and I will be back to sweaters and design and all kinds of other really fun things, and that is on the horizon. I can see it, I can smell it, I can taste it. So yeah, I'll be back there. And I think that's how I have the brain power for today. So I think I might cut it off there. Oh, I forgot one thing I wanted to mention, what I'm wearing. For anybody who doesn't know, this is the Alias cardigan. Woo! It's got these great details. Great details on the sleeves and the cuffs. This is the Alias cardigan by Isabel Kramer, and I knit 2 different versions of it. This is the DK weight version from Isle Yarns in the UK, and I wear them both all winter long, and I am also a convert to wearing wool all the time. So it's been a lot of conversion lately and a lot of survival, and so I think that's it, and thanks for joining me for this wee podcast from New York. I hope you all are surviving as well as can be, especially up through the holidays. Happy holidays to anyone celebrating anything in the next month or so, and I will see you next time, perhaps even out of survival mode. Have a good one, guys. Thanks for stopping by.